Hello Internet, this is Sophia, the Red Angel. Not too long ago I found a video in which Greg Koukl from Stand to Reason Stand to Reason, discussed what he would do if someone tried to use something that he calls the Columbo Tactic against him. Now you might ask, what exactly is the Columbo Tactic? Well, in short, it is a set of ways that he advocates going through conversations with people he has disagreements with, in which instead of making statements, he asks questions. He calls it the Columbo Tactic in reference to a fictional detective, Lieutenant Frank Columbo, from the eponymous detective TV series Columbo. Now, how is the Columbo method different from the other method of navigating these conversations with questions rather than statements? You know, the Socratic method? Well, on that I am not really clear. Some people might suggest that since it is employed by a Christian apologist who is known for using very faulty reasoning, the difference might be that the Columbo tactic is more conducive to blatant fallacies than is the Socratic method. However, anyone who believes that that is the distinction has obviously never attempted to read Plato's Republic, where it is very clearly demonstrated that the Socratic method can indeed be used fallaciously to the point of advocating outright absurdity. So that cannot be the difference. So I will just accept that I do not know what the difference is and go on from there. Anyway, Koukl says that there are 3 modes in which he uses the Columbo method. The first is supposedly to gather information on his interlocutor's position. If he really uses that mode of the Columbo method to the fullest, which I doubt, by the way, then good for him. I would much rather that theists start actually asking us atheists why we do not believe in God, rather than just assuming that we are suppressing knowledge of him because we just want to sin, or because we are just angry at God or something. Of course, he claims that he uses it on his interlocutors because often they say things that they are supposedly just socialized to say without really thinking about it. What? Socialized to say it without really thinking of it? You mean like being told from a young age that there are certain things that if you dare question, you risk spending an eternity in conscious, everlasting torment? Because it seems to me that that is the typical way that fundamentalist Christian kids are raised. On the other hand, I have never heard of atheist parents, let alone rational, skeptical parents, raising their kids with such mental abuse. I would have even gone so far as to say that the fact that Koukl thinks that this about people who disagree with his religion is a sign that he does not use the Columbo method in its first mode enough, except that I am prevented from saying that by the fact that I know that he does not exclusively debate atheists, let alone rational skeptics, but also spends a decent amount of time debating adherents of other religions whose claims are just as unsubstantiated as his own, unaware of the irony of how his own beliefs are also just as unsubstantiated as theirs are. But anyway, on to the second mode. He says that the second mode of the Columbo method is to reverse the burden of proof by asking questions such as, how did you come to that conclusion? Frankly, any atheist counter-apologist worth their salt would be able to answer that by explaining why the burden of the proof should be on the one making the positive assertion. But it is the third mode of the Columbo method that Koukl considers to be a problem if others try to use it on him. That third method is when you use questions to make a point. He considers the advantage of making a point this way to be that once the other person has put the pieces of the puzzle on the table, it is much harder for them to take it back. Why is that a problem if others use the Columbo method in this way? Because he is afraid that people will ask him leading questions in order to get him to unsuspectingly give answers that can then be used to trap him. He, of course, assures that he would never use the third mode of the Columbo method in such a dishonorable manner. But is that true? Would he really never use the third mode of the Columbo method in such a manner? Well, to examine that claim, we have to examine an earlier video of his titled "The Question That Stops Christians in Their Tracks." In that video, Koukl discusses how his brand of Christian might respond if asked a certain question point blank.
So you're saying that anyone who doesn't believe just like you is going to hell? That's the way he put the question.
And that seems to me like a pretty straightforward way of putting that question. If that question stops Christians in their tracks, one might wonder what that says about Christianity and about the supposedly all-loving God that Christianity claims to represent.
Now, some people have said if you're careful how you push the question, you could win any argument.
But again, this isn't exactly a very slick way of framing the question. It seems pretty straightforward.
But it was put in a way that made me look really, really bad.
Well, if you consider it to be fair or reasonable that all those who do not buy into your religion are destined to go to hell, then yes, it does make you look like a dross bag. But that is not really relevant, because the religion that you are promoting makes no claim that you are all-loving. If you can be shown to be a total dross bag, that does not prove Christianity to be false. What is relevant is that it makes a God who would impose such a system look like a dross bag. And that is far more relevant because Christianity does make the claim that God is all-loving and all-good. So, what Koukl is going to try to do here is relay how when another person asked him the same question, he used the third mode of the Columbo method to lead them to the conclusion that God sending all non-Christians to hell is in no way incompatible with a supposed attribute of all-lovingness. Let us see if Koukl was able to do it without using questions to trap his interlocutor, or if he did use trap questions after all.
Here was the first question I asked. Do you think that people who commit moral crimes ought to be punished? In other words, do people who do bad things, should they pay for them?
And the short answer to the question is yes. However, as with many questions, the full answer has caveats and nuances. But explaining all of the caveats and nuances to the question can make the conversation go very slowly. And if I have no idea where Koukl is going in his line of questioning, I might not know which, if any, of those caveats and nuances is relevant. It might not even occur to me to think of them. So if I do not know what direction Koukl is going in, I probably would give nothing beyond the short answer to the question, which once again is yes. That said, it so happens that I saw this whole video through a few times before I even began scripting my response. So in this case, I do know where Koukl is going. And so instead, what I will say is yes, people do deserve to be punished if they do bad things. But I would also add the caveat that the punishment needs to fit the crime. Sending someone to an eternity of fiery torment for, say, shouting angrily at someone who does not deserve it, well, that is a bit excessive. And as a matter of fact, I do not know of anyone who has done so much evil that they deserve to be subjected to the torments of hell for all eternity. Do not get me wrong, there are people who deserve to go to hell for a really, really, really long time, but their atrocities, however extensive, are still finite. It might seem to us like sending them to hell for eternity is more fitting, but that is just because the amount of time that they would justly deserve to go to hell for is way, way, way longer than our meager ability to fathom. Another caveat, of course, is that just because I am agreeing that people who do bad things deserve to be punished for them, does not mean that they ever actually will be punished for them. But that point I will not make as much a deal of because this does not seem to be a discussion on the level of factual accuracy of the afterlife that Koukl advocates, but merely about whether or not asserting it causes anyone to come off as a complete dross bag. But I would not mention any of these caveats if it were not for the fact that I know where Koukl is going with his line of questioning. So the question is, if I just say yes at the part of the conversation where he first asks the question, and then try to insert an important caveat later on when its relevance becomes apparent, would he gracefully allow me to do so? Well, I do not know. The video never answers this question directly, but a bit earlier in the video, he does say this.
So instead, I am going to use questions to get those pieces placed on the table by the other person. Because if they put those pieces on the table, it's a lot harder for them to take them off, to deny them.
So his whole point of asking questions is so that once his interlocutor is the one who puts the pieces on the table, it is harder for them to take them off again? Well, then I suppose it is possible that Koukl would respond gracefully if I tried to insert the caveats later on when their relevance becomes apparent. But he might see this as allowing me to take the pieces of the puzzle off the table once I place them there. And once again, the whole point of his use of the Columbo method here is to make it harder for me to do that. So while he might allow me to add caveats once their relevance becomes apparent, it seems far more likely that what he would actually do is shout "no backsies" like a third grader.
Second question. Have you ever done any wrong things?
Well, yeah. I have done lots of things that I am ashamed of. I won't even bother to go into how many of those things, even if not all of them, were done back when I believed in God, and that my belief at the time in God was a huge contributing factor to many of the bad things that I did, because frankly, that is not relevant here. What is relevant is that for all the bad stuff I did, it is not enough to warrant sending me to hell for eternity. I don't even think that in my case, it is even enough to warrant sending me to hell for an unfathomably long amount of time that would be indistinguishable from eternity to my limited cognition. So yes, a certain amount of punishment might be fair on me, but certainly not an eternal sentence in hell, or even a super mega long sentence in hell. Let's go on.
Now, do I need to tell this man he's a sinner? No. He just told me. Do I need to tell him that he's under judgment? No. He just told me.
All that stuff about him having told you that he is under judgment, that might work for that guy that you met at that Barnes & Noble event, but not for me. I have not admitted that I am under judgment, just that I deserve a certain amount of judgment. That when I die, I might deserve a certain relatively brief stint in hell, assuming that I have not been adequately punished in life for what bad I have done, which is in no way an ironclad safe assumption. But deserving and receiving judgment are not the same thing. I know of no evidence that any afterlife exists at all, and deserving or not deserving punishment afterwards doesn't constitute as evidence of any afterlife actually existing. But I will let this point slide, because this is not really a question of whether your view of the afterlife is accurate, but rather about whether it is compatible with the existence that you claim of an all-loving God. So instead, I will just focus on the bit about how I deserve some punishment for things I've done, but certainly not an eternity in hell. So in short, Greg Koukl claims that he would never use the third mode of the Columbo method to trap someone with trick questions. But from this example that he gives, it seems very unlikely that this claim of his is indeed accurate. Still, since we've gone this far, let's see where he ultimately takes his argument.
We both know we're guilty, and we both know we deserve what we're going to get. And then the judge pauses and says, by the way, are either of you guys interested in a pardon?
Oh wait, do we deserve punishment or do we not? You can't have it both ways. But anyway, the kind of God you are describing here is one who will let people scot-free without any punishment if they accept the terms of his pardon, and will send people to eternal torture, which, as I explained, nobody deserves for even the slightest offense if they do not accept those terms of pardon. Already, this is not the way an all-loving God would behave. It is the way a completely nepotist God would behave. And even that is assuming that everyone has the same opportunity to make an informed decision whether or not to accept those terms of pardon. Not only does that fail to account for people who genuinely in this life are unconvinced that your God exists, but who, if your religion is true, get surprised in the afterlife to learn that he does. It also fails to account for everyone in the world who is going to hell because they had the misfortune of having been raised in, or by other means come to, the wrong religion. Now granted, people like Koukl get around that by believing that their religion is obvious, that it is written in our hearts, so that we all know it to be true deep down, but that atheists, as well as adherents of religions other than Koukl's brand of Christianity, are just suppressing that knowledge. But this only goes to show that they are not using the first mode of the Columbo method enough. If they did use it adequately, they would know that however obvious Christianity seems to them, Islam seems equally obvious to millions of Muslims, Rabbinical Judaism seems equally obvious to Rabbinic Jews, Hinduism seems equally obvious to millions of Hindus, and so forth. And we atheists, we are not rebelling against your God. We merely are genuinely unconvinced that he exists. And if you used the first mode of your Columbo method against us more, you would know that. So, what would you like me to talk about next? Let me know in this YouTube video's comments area, or you could join my Discord and let me know there. You can find an invite to join my Discord on my main links page. You can in turn find a link to my main links page in the YouTube video description area of this video. You can also find a link there to my Ko-Fi page, where you can get updates on this channel that I am at present unable to give you on YouTube due to my current channel size. My Ko-Fi page is also where you can go if you want to support my channel financially, because if you like this channel now, you should see what I will be able to do with it when its budget is no longer limited to whatever I am able to siphon away for my personal living expenses. Also, don't forget to help my channel grow by liking, sharing, subscribing, and ringing the bell. And until next time, see ya!